Welcome back to Body Talk with Becks. This week I am interviewing a young woman all the way over from in Australia. Her name is Anja Christoffersen. She was also born with VACTERL syndrome, so it will be a great comparison to last week's episode with Savannah. I've broken this episode up into 2 different episodes because we talked for quite a long time. So let's jump right on in. Just had an interview yesterday with Savannah.
Oh, good. How was it?
It was really good. Yeah. I've never talked to anyone who has VACTERL. So it was really interesting hearing all the different things. And she kind of warned me that you have similar experiences. So I'm interested in seeing what's similar, but also what's different about your experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being in different countries as well makes it a little bit different. I haven't had to fight like insurance companies and things to be able to get my medical care. It's all been free. And I think there are quite a few differences. And what she's doing with her life is different from what I'm doing. I'm really bad with animals, unlike her. So
you don't have to fight insurance companies.
No, like
that's so nice.
Free. I know, isn't it nice?
Wow. Man, yeah, I wish. No, I have so many memories of my mom like just barely scraping by because we were just getting hit with bills and like she was raising me and my brother like just as a single mom. So
yeah,
very interesting the opportunities different countries give.
Definitely. And, when I was growing up, like a lot of the VACTERL community was in America. There wasn't anything in Australia, and there still isn't too much, but we would see, online that people were selling their houses just for their children to survive. And that's just heartbreaking. Like, yeah.
So yeah. We definitely need to learn how to make our system better over here for medical. So to start with then, what we did yesterday then for Savannah and me, we just went letter by letter and talked about that thing individually first. So I don't know if that's easiest for you or if it's makes more sense to go chronologically for you.
It's really up to you. Yeah, I can do letter by letter. Usually, like I'm good at summarizing letter by letter of my major issues and then kind of like delving in more chronologically and what's kind of unfolded. But like any way that you structured or ask, I can, just follow.
Yeah, let's do maybe just like a quick summary then. I liked that idea. A quick summary of each letter of what you had and then kind of delve more in depth after that chronologically, I think.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so what did you have with V?
So for me, V was obviously vertebral. So I had hemivertebra, which is partially formed vertebrae. I had scoliosis, which is the curvature of the spine, an extra lumbar vertebra. So I'm quite tall, which has helped with, my modeling career. But then I'm missing bones in my sacrum. So I don't have a tailbone and some of those other bones, which also affects, your pelvic nerves and what you can actually feel.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. So your nerves are affected by that. Does that cause you any like extra pain? Is it that kind of feeling sensations? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's in my lower back. I actually have quite a bit of pain and it's like, rather than, a nice tailbone, it's just a plaque, my spine just drops off. So it feels really strange. And it's like all of those nerves under there are just, bunched together. And when I sit down, I can get, bruises and things like that and have quite a bit of lower back pain.
Oh, wow.
Which is frustrating. But in terms of how the nerves are affected, it's, when they look at incontinence and probability for incontinence, they often look at the base of your spine because those nerves are so essential in, controlling your bladder and bowel, but also making sure if you can feel things, down there.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have issues with incontinence because of the nerves? Yeah.
So I have issues with incontinence, like bowel incontinence, but that's mainly from the A of my condition because I had a pelvic reconstruction. But just the likelihood of me ever being able to gain continence, it's not going to happen, unfortunately. But I've been able to maintain my bladder continence, which is very rare in people that were born with cloaca like I was. So I'm very grateful, but I'm not counting on having it forever.
That's good. Yeah. So you had a full pelvic reconstruction done. What was that for?
So that was the A of my condition. So I was born with a condition called cloaca, and that's one of the most complex anorectal malformations. So that occurs in about 1 in 50,000 births. And it's where the vagina, the urethra, and the intestine all come into one common opening. But I actually had 2 vaginal openings going into that common channel. So when I was born, I had to have a colostomy for my bowel and a vesicostomy for my bladder just to be able to get waste out of my body. And then when I was 7 months old, I had a full pelvic reconstruction. So I was literally cut right from the front to the back and, 3 openings made and then stitched up again. So, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Do you know what that recovery looked like for your parents? Like, what kinds of things they had to do to aid in your recovery at that young? Because I'm just thinking of like diaper rash on the side of your legs and like how did they handle that?
It was a little bit challenging. So I had the colostomy and vesicostomy closed. So then I was actually functional, I guess, to get waste out of my pelvis. But because I didn't have any exposure to any like urine or feces actually touching my body like normal babies would in their nappy, as soon as that happened, after 7 months, like obviously my skin wasn't ready for it. It wasn't exposed to it. So the like diaper rash and things was horrific. So I'd be, picked up from, preschool or whatever, and I would have a nappy full of blood because it was that raw. So it was quite challenging. And then also in that time, because they reconstructed all 3 openings, my anal opening had to be dilated. So we went through a period of dilatation where they had to use these rods and basically force them up my bottom to break it open and to make it a reasonable size so I could actually get stuff out of me. That was quite intensive and really was the only kind of growth that I was going to get in my anal opening size throughout my life, apart from, kind of generally growing. But the scar tissue obviously restricts, how big it would get. So that's why it was so necessary at a young age. I'm just glad I don't have to do it as an adult, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. When you not like you're not self-conscious of it, growing up as a teenager or anything, but I think it's easier as a kid to handle it because it's your normal kind of.
Yeah. And I think that like I don't remember the pain that I was in as a child. I've been through so much, and I'm sure that you can relate that you remember certain things, but you don't necessarily remember like how bad it was and what that experience was like. And as I grew up in my teens, I had to have vaginal dilatation because my vaginal opening was so small because it was also reconstructed. And so I went to a gynecologist when I was about, 14 to see what the situation was. And my vaginal capacity was the size of my little finger in width and in depth. So I had to then start, vaginal dilatation to actually make it a functional size. And that was, painful, but also incredibly daunting. And so it made me grateful that I did the anal dilatation, when I was a baby and couldn't remember it.
Oh, yeah. 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 I didn't have quite the same thing as you did, but I did have to have reconstruction done on my vaginal opening as well. And we had that when I think I was 18 at the time when we finally discovered that I needed to have that done. And I just remember it being such a pain and like kind of embarrassing too, that like it was something that I had done wrong, even though like I didn't do anything, obviously. But
I think it's a really difficult, situation. And I don't know about your experience, but for me, I'd go to my gynecologist and I'd say, can I meet other people that are going through this? Because no one talks about any of this. And they seem to want to keep us quite separate, which I thought was a bit odd. But yeah, I think it's quite difficult, especially going through high school and when other people, at least for me, were becoming sexually active and I couldn't at that stage. I think it's quite isolating because even though I don't look like I have a disability, there are a lot of essential things that I couldn't do. I wasn't really meant to eat. I wasn't meant to go to the bathroom, but that's all been kind of semi-fixed. But then also not being able to just have sex, like that's one of the kind of essential body functions. And I think it's sometimes quite a bit to process.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even just not being able to wear a tampon would be such a big life change in being able to have that by having the surgery. Because I couldn't wear tampons until after I had my surgery. So it was all, pads and things like that, which
same
don't
for me.
always
And
work.
no, and it was good to get out of like swimming classes in school, I found, because you can't go swimming because I'm on my period and I can't use a tampon, but it helps you as well when you actually want to do things and live your life when you're on your period and you can only wear a pad.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they were actually able to fix things for you at an early enough age that you can have at least a semi-normal life in that respect.
Yeah, thank you.
And did you have what is the C for again? I know I just talked to Savannah yesterday, but I can't remember what C stands for.
Cardiac. So my heart, I was born with a hole in my heart at birth, but that was able to basically repair itself or fix itself. So it wasn't major. But then I'm very grateful for that. But then did have, bradycardia, which is a slow heart rate. And as I've gotten older, my heart rate's just quite unstable. So I take a beta blocker, which is able to, regulate things for me. But when I had, other surgeries, it actually affected my vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve is also very important for, your heart regulation. So I think that's probably why I got a little bit screwed there.
Wow. Does that restrict you in terms of like activity, having such a slow heartbeat?
A bit, because now it's gone from being really, really slow to too fast, basically. And so I need all this medication to slow it down again. And I haven't really done, exercise for quite a while, but I used to do a lot more than I do now. But it was just, things change and evolve really. And my heart is a lot worse now than it was, a few years ago. So now at times, like I might need a support person with me when I go shopping because I'm worried that I will pass out or my heart rate's just unstable. And I thought I wasn't very reliant on the medication that I was on, but we had floods recently here and we couldn't access the pharmacy. And without my heart meds, I developed a tremor. Like I was like this, like my hand was just shaking, my whole body was shaking. And yeah, it's not good that I've become reliant on it, but I'm very grateful that there's a medication that can fix it a little bit.
Wow, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's not what I expected. And I think that so much has evolved with VACTERL for me because I thought that it was something that I was born with, something that could then get medically fixed or surgically fixed. And then I was done and good to go for the rest of my life. And I think it kind of goes back to that medical model of disability that, there's something wrong with you, we need to fix you. And I thought that that's what had happened, that I'd been fixed. And I was in and out of hospital up until I was about 5, like very, very frequently. And then I had a period of, I guess, healthy years, we could call them. So I'd only have a few hospital admissions or a few specialist appointments. But when I got to about 15, 16, I suddenly became really unwell again. And life has just never really been the same. And it was like my whole immune system was affected. I didn't have the same energy levels. My fatigue was quite extreme. Like I had, chronic pain and all this stuff just started piling up. And I realized that it wasn't just something I was born with and that I quick got over, but it's something that is going to affect the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I've been wanting to kind of showcase on the podcast is that it is something that we have to take into account for everyday life. It's, other people take for granted that they don't have pain or migraines or have to take medication every day. And all they have to worry about, is getting up and going to work. And some of us have a little bit more to it than that.
Absolutely. And how my life's evolved, I always thought that I was going to study medicine and become a doctor because I thought that that was the way that I could give back to the health system that I felt like I knew a lot about. And I do really know a lot about, and so would you from your experiences. But I just wasn't well enough, by the time that I had to leave high school because I was so unwell. I knew that that wasn't really a possibility for me. And it wasn't just, having to get the qualification, but how could I be a doctor if some days I can't really get out of bed, or some days I might be passing out because of my heart rate or whatever else? And I looked for other ways that I could, contribute and give back. And I think that's really formed my career path. But it also is that I can't just get a full-time job or a part-time job. I'm at the hospital so often with specialist teams and are unwell, like at the drop of a hat. So it's definitely a different way of managing things. It's nowhere near as simple as, your, I guess, normal life, whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I've definitely had days where I had to talk to previous managers or bosses about, oh, I need this date next week off because I have to have an MRI for, they're checking on this thing with my bladder again. Yeah, we really do have to kind of plan ahead and think about those things.
Absolutely.
I feel like those are things that should be worked into more average everyday life. Managers being understanding of there are some people that do actually have a lot of medical problems that they need to be aware of when they're working, and giving them enough sick days that they can actually take off and go to see their specialist and things like that.
I think one of the big things for me, especially in starting, Champion Health Agency, was to try and create flexible opportunities, because I may not be able to be present for a full week at work, but if you give me a task, I can complete that task. I just might be doing it in the middle of the night when I can't sleep, or, when I feel better in between doctor's appointments. And I think that there need to be more opportunities like that are flexible but still meaningful. Because for me, I feel like, there are so many accommodations and adaptations that employees are starting to make and become, more aware. But I actually don't really even know what kind of adaptations I could ask for, apart from, some days I might not be able to show up. Some days I'll have to leave suddenly. Some days I'll have to suddenly go to the hospital for appointments. It's very, very unpredictable. And I'm sure you can relate to living a very unpredictable life, and to have something that can actually move with you and give you like a meaningful, income, I think is so important.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of veered off topic a little bit there.
You really did. We're up to TE.
Yeah. And that's trachea and esophagus, right?
Yes.
That one.
So I was born with a tracheoesophageal fistula and esophageal atresia. So the fancy way of saying that, my food pipe was connected into my air pipe going into my lungs, and there was no connection to my stomach at all. So that was reconstructed when I was 5 hours old, the same time that they did the colostomy and vesicostomy. And they cut under my arm, they took out a few ribs, they did what they needed to do, they put it back, and that was it. But what it meant was that it was in that surgery that I had my vagus nerve damaged. And it meant that I don't have any swallowing contractions. So my food pipe is functional by gravity only. There are literally no contractions at all to move things down. So it's difficult sometimes when I eat. Like, I have to wash everything down with so much liquid. And then sometimes after I eat, I get a bit of a crackling in my chest, a little bit of a changed voice. So yeah, I just cough my way through it. I haven't really done anything else to fix it, because there's nothing that can be done to fix something like that. And then in terms of my air pipe, I have a condition called tracheobronchomalacia, which is where your trachea and the bronchioles going like in your lungs, they're partially collapsed. So my air pipe was collapsed into a figure 8. And it was obviously really difficult for me to breathe. And lying down, I basically really, really struggled. So I've just grown up, trying to do breathing physiotherapy and things like that and strengthen my lungs and everything. But it still is a bit compromised, because when they went in, they had to go through cartilage and things that was responsible for holding my air pipe up.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I think that, I didn't even realize that my vagus nerve was damaged until about 2 years ago, I was told, and they did all of those manometry tests properly and realized, and that kind of explains a lot of things, like the heart dysregulation, my temperature regulation isn't great, like all those other strange things that you don't really think about and think it's normal, or normal for me, but it isn't.
Wow. I'm just thinking about how like even just one of those things would impact your life so much. And you have both going on. That's wow.
Yeah.
So do you see like a physical therapist for breathing exercises, or?
Not Not anymore. So I did a lot of that when I was young, quite intensively, but now I don't see anyone really for my breathing. I just self-manage, but I see specialists for almost everything else, which is frustrating.
Okay. Did you find that when you did the physical therapy for it, that it was helpful?
Definitely. I had all these different activities. You might have seen them in like hospital photos or videos or whatever, of people like blowing into tubes and trying to raise balls up in a pipe. So it was things like that, even just getting a hose and putting it in, a big bucket of water with bubbles and food coloring so it looked nicer, and practicing blowing. And it was so hard. I would be exhausted. And it's, something as simple as breathing and blowing. And I've been the person that isn't good at blowing out candles on birthday cakes because I can't get enough air out. So yeah, it was very helpful. I think that my breathing now is better than when I was younger. I haven't got it reassessed, but I think it's got to do with, that physical therapy that I had when I was younger, and then just, I guess, pushing my lungs to the limit when I need to, which isn't ideal.
And it sounds like those are all exercises that you can do yourself at home whenever you feel like you need to do them. So that's good. Wow. And I guess there's not really like enough knowledge yet around that for more improvements, is there?
No, not that I'm aware of. But when I was younger and they saw how badly my air pipe was collapsed, they wanted to do quite a large operation at that time, and it was to put a stent in to hold it open. And we ended up not doing the surgery because there were just so many risks at that time. And I guess I'm glad that we didn't, because I'm okay now without it. But I think that they just kind of go in and put stents in, and then that's kind of, you're fixed, like all the other things supposedly
fixed with air quotes.
Exactly.
It would have just been like a Band-Aid on a scab, pretty much.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. Ours for renal?
Yes.
Okay.
Very well. So I was born with a single kidney. Thankfully, I haven't had too many issues with the kidney, just, some recurrent infections and things like that. But yeah, my one kidney is larger than a normal kidney because it, keeps up with all the fluid that I drink. But yeah,
but it's healthy.
Healthy.
That's good. Do you have to like monitor it though? Because I know like Savannah does yearly appointments for ultrasounds and just to kind of check on it, make sure it's working smoothly.
Yeah, I don't really have anything so structured and organized, but it's like, oh, I've got a pain in my kidney, I better go to the doctor, and they'll do a scan and work it out then. And I don't really have a lot of those regular checks that I think should actually happen with VACTERL that are really standard. It's more like a fire comes up, we put the fire out. Like we try to. So yeah, it's not a very proactive approach to my health, unfortunately. It's very reactive.
Sometimes that's all you can manage though. Especially with like so many different things going on, it's hard to keep track of what needs to be focused on next.
Absolutely. And I think it's good to have someone that actually knows about the full spectrum of VACTERL and that can manage these things. But I don't really have that person because it's such a rare condition. So I've got all of these different specialists that all look at their little part of my body, and they rarely talk to each other. And there's no one that has that, VACTERL expertise that can say, all right, you need to check this, and this, because, for example, with my food pipe, I've always had quite bad reflux. And if you even have just the reconstruction of your food pipe and or reflux, but mainly that reconstruction that I had, you're supposed to have quite regular checks to see if, there have been any cell changes because you're at high risk for esophageal cancer. That was something I had no idea about. And I didn't have, one of those scopes and checks until I was, in my late teens. Because I had no idea that was even something that you had to do. And I think that's why you need those specialists that actually know what VACTERL is and can kind of monitor those things proactively to make sure nothing goes wrong without you realizing.
Yeah. Well, and I think also something that really stuck out to me is that you have specialists in all of these specific little things and they don't talk to each other, but it's all related to that you were born with it. It's all related to the same thing. So I think it would make sense for them to communicate. Maybe they would have caught the vagus nerve sooner if they had realized like there's some crossover, there's some symptoms that you're feeling that maybe you don't realize, like, oh, there's a cause to that being, some of the things that you mentioned, like temperature change and things like that.
Absolutely. And with that, vagus nerve thing, I started having issues with my heart when I was, 15, 16. And I went to, the cardiologist. I had the tests that I needed to have. They couldn't really find out what was wrong. And they, sent me away, and I was in tears and begging for help. And they were like, there's nothing wrong with you. We can't do anything. And they sent me away. And it's only been until last year or the year before that I managed to get into a cardiologist that listened to me. And they just gave me a medication that literally cost $6 over the counter. And it's changed my life because I can actually do things now. So yeah, I had to wait 6 years to be able to get a $6 medication because I wasn't believed.
That's ridiculous. I mean, that's also the importance of having a doctor that will listen to you. And
yeah.
But we shouldn't have to fight so hard to be heard.
No, absolutely not. And I think when you're unwell, it's so hard to fight. There are so many fights that I could, have now, but I'm just tired. I'm really tired. You speak to so many doctors, you re-explain yourself, you have to fight to be believed. And sometimes now it gets to a point where I don't have the fight left in me to prove to them that there's something wrong that they need to help me with or to fix. I just go away and deal with it and stop talking about it anymore. And that isn't something I'd recommend for other people. And I can be such a strong advocate for other people. But when it comes to myself, it's so hard to constantly be told that or dismissed or not listened to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. That's been one of my big crusades with this, is just getting doctors to listen to patients, and because that's what they're supposed to be doing anyways. I mean, their whole
actually do their job.
Yeah, they get into becoming a doctor because they want to help people. So listen to your patients and actually help instead of just doing them away, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's really just so sad. It breaks my heart completely because I feel like for a lot of things, I was believed because I had this really complex condition. There's obviously something very wrong with my anatomy. It was very obvious what wasn't right. But as I've gotten older and I've experienced more, generalized symptoms like a lower immune system or, those fatigue or nausea or, inability to exercise very well, which is partially my sporting ability, but mostly my medical situation, that with those things, it's so hard to actually get taken seriously, be listened to, have a solution. And it can be very exhausting, but you see so many other people that have gone through not being believed right from the beginning and having to fight for diagnoses for so long. And I've developed medical trauma as a result of my experiences, but I've met so many others that have experienced it too. And it breaks my heart that the medical system is traumatizing so many people without realizing it, yet knowing that trauma has such a negative effect on health outcomes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you really think about it too, I mean, the body is already putting out so much energy to try to fix itself internally. And especially if you have, more than one thing going on, that's a lot of energy going to multiple different things that are, not quite normal. And then you have to find the energy to argue with the doctor saying, I have all these things. That's so much output for your body to handle.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that, people with things that are more visible maybe would get taken more seriously. But I have a lot of people that I know that have more visible disabilities and they aren't. It doesn't change things,
That's really sad. Well, we'll be the change in the world. We'll do it.
We have to. I think it has to be us.
Yeah. Okay. Moving right along. We're on L. That's for limbs.
Yeah, so I didn't have anything in the limb category. So invisible disability, all the things inside did not work, but outside it looked like typical, I guess.
Well, at least one of them wasn't there. So that's good. episode of Body Talk with Becks. I know I cut this one a little bit short, but we got so much coming in the next episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts at. Also, consider becoming a patron on patreon.com. We just rolled out some new really fun stickers for patrons, which are also available on the website. If you would like to share your story or know someone who would like to, I can be contacted through my website, www.bodytalkwithbecks.com, or on social media. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to Body Talk with Becks. This is the second episode with Anja Christoffersen for the second half of our conversation about growing up with VACTERL and everything that she's accomplished since then, because it has really impacted her career path. And let's just jump right on in. Logically, and just kind of go a little bit more into depth. I mean, all of that obviously wasn't as neat as like 1 year you dealt with this and 1 year you dealt with that. I'm sure it was just wherever.
Chaotic.
Yeah. I'm just trying to imagine the schedule.
I'm not sure if Savannah told you, but her and I have a good conversation about these fires, you know, that it's a fire that comes up, you have to put the fire out. So for me, I feel like a firefighter with my medical stuff, that I'm constantly putting out fires. So like I said, the first 5 years of my life were very challenging. So I was in and out of hospital constantly. I had my pelvic reconstruction, but then I had, constipation quite constantly. And it was because my larger colon, at least now, because I've had the studies done, it doesn't move things through quickly at all. I had a 5-day motility study, and it showed that I think 85% of things were still in my colon 5 days later, which is quite a lot. It's not supposed to be like that. So I had all this constipation as a child, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but for me, I was hospitalized over and over and over with it. I had, NG tubes like from my nose down to my stomach, filling me with like laxatives. And I would be able to have NG for 5 days of laxatives without anything happening in the hospital. And it was very, very difficult, and obviously would lead to nausea. And there were times as a child where I'd be vomiting my own feces because I would be so blocked up that it would be coming out the top, which is disgusting and horrible. In addition to all of that, I had a lot of urinary tract infections because there was just, contaminants all the time. And that then obviously posed a risk to my single kidney. But at the same time as all of that was going on, because I had that tracheobronchomalacia and I wasn't able to clear my lungs properly and breathe very easily, I would have pneumonia quite often. And so I'd be in and out of hospital with pneumonia that was quite severe. And there was one time when I was 2.5 that I actually flatlined, like my heart stopped because I couldn't get any air in and I was so sick with that pneumonia. So it was quite constant, and there was nothing really that could fix it or that could remedy it. It was just like, these are the wars, these first 5 years, we just need to survive through them. And I did. And throughout it all, I was a happy, joyful kid. Like I was doing the same as everybody else was doing, except like, had bowel incontinence and was having some issues there. But I also had, rectal enemas to try and clear out my bowel and all of that. But I thought that everybody else had VACTERL. I thought everybody else did bowel flushes. I didn't feel ashamed. I felt completely normal. I thought everyone else was weird because they didn't do the same things as me. So yeah, it was those first 5 years that were very difficult. But then like I said to you, I had those years where I was okay. And in those years, I just had, the occasional bout of pneumonia or normal things like breaking your arm as a child or getting your tonsils out. But as I got older, it was really around 15 or 16 that it was like every single body system had something wrong with it. And it wasn't like it could be pinned down, like, you've got ovarian cysts, but that doesn't explain all the other issues. You've got this, but this doesn't explain all the other issues. And they found that somehow in my pelvic reconstruction, even though they made 3 separate holes, my urethra had grown to become inside my vaginal opening. And I'd tell doctors about this, and they'd just think that I wasn't smart and didn't understand that, the whole area isn't your vagina, it's just the hole. But I'd, tell them, and I don't know how that happened, but that obviously has led to so many more UTIs, and has been, a little bit challenging to manage, because it's difficult not to have UTIs, I think, when you're sexually active and your urethra is inside your vagina. Like, it's not how things are supposed to work. So when I was 15, I had that going on, and then I had, a really low immune system, and I got to a stage where I struggled to even sit up or get up out of bed. It was like a chronic fatigue thing that never was diagnosed as chronic fatigue, but they picked up on like 3 different viruses I had. One was a mosquito-borne virus, and all these different things were happening in my body. Like, the constipation was back, the ovarian cysts were there, my heart was having its issues. So it was like there were just fires everywhere, and I had to work through them, and had big pelvic infections, and then lots of subsequent surgeries in my late teens and now early 20s.
Wow. All of that just, I can't imagine like being in your shoes for a lot of that.
Yeah, I think that, like, when I was younger, I was, very resilient. And I don't like the word resilient, because I don't think it should be used in these settings. I don't think we should be praised to keep getting back up every time we fall down without, support, just with the strength of your mind. Like, as much as I promote that and think it's great, I think we need to really nurture people and help them to get back up again. And you don't have to be strong all the time, because I think through a lot of it, I was strong. It wasn't typical for other people to be going through these things and to talk about some things that were just so casual, like throwaway remarks to me, like, oh, I could die because I have all these antibiotic allergies and they can't treat me with new antibiotics. That'd be like, oh, whatever, like, they'll work it out. But to other people, it's really confronting. And it's really confronting, I think, having someone that's unwell in your life. So I started to realize that. And then, you put up the wall and you're like, but it's okay, it's going to be fine. And you keep all those worries to yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just drawing a blank right now of how to process.
No worries. It's a lot, see?
Wow. So were you going to schools throughout all of this, or were you homeschooling at all?
So I was going to school up until halfway through grade 11, when I was just so unwell that I had to leave high school, and I went an alternative pathway, which was like we call them universities here. I think it's college there, but they have like a college to get into the university, which was like equivalent to, high school or something else. So I went there when I was like 16 and did my high school equivalent so I could get into university. But yeah, throughout it, like, I was still in school. I would have, time off if I was unwell, but I was really just trying to portray that whole, like, I'm normal and this is great. Like, I'm exactly the same as everybody else. I don't have to put something up my bum tonight to empty my bowel. Like, everything's okay. But I was with, everyone else that didn't really have that many medical issues that they spoke about either.
So did you have like close friends that you could talk to about things?
Yeah, I did. I like told all of my close friends about, the things that were happening. And I felt like I was really articulate in that. And I think maybe I was to an extent at times and in glimpses, but I realized that when my book came out in 2018 and so many people were able to read it, and especially my close friends, that they actually said to me that they had no idea what was going on. None of the things that was happening through high school they knew about. They didn't know about all the stuff when I was a child. I probably put on that strong front and just gave, bare minimum details, which wasn't actually my intention. But yeah, I don't think they really understood everything that was going on, because I didn't really articulate the full extent of things, and I think tried to brush off a lot. And I didn't really identify as having a disability when I was, in those healthy years, because things were fine. If you think of a disability as something that restricts your activities or things like that, I didn't have too much of that. Like, I had, still couldn't really swallow properly, still couldn't really breathe properly, but it was okay for me. It was normal. But as I got older and saw how much my activities could be restricted by my health, my medical appointments, all these fluctuations, that's when I think things changed and I started to articulate myself in a different way.
I really like that you said that you didn't view yourself as having a disability, because I definitely identify with that. And I know most of my growing up, I viewed myself as well as not having a disability. Because I'm not in a wheelchair, or something like that, where it's visible and affects my ability to walk around. I always thought I was totally normal.
Exactly.
And it took me a while, to really realize, like, no, this is a disability. I pay attention to more medical things and health-related things than a lot of my friends do, because I have to. You have to stay on top of it.
Absolutely. And I think the fact that the image of disability, which is changing now, I feel, but has always been associated with, being in a wheelchair, and that's what's on disabled toilets and things like that. Mm-hmm. Even though it's important, it's been so invalidating, I feel, to people like you and me and so many others that live with invisible disabilities or other disabilities that don't require them to be in a wheelchair, because I never asked for the supports or adaptations that I needed because I didn't feel like I had a disability or like I deserved them. I didn't understand equity in that, if you give me a bit more support, I'm actually on an equal level. I just always thought about equality. You give them an apple, you give me an apple, like that's fine. But I didn't realize that things were actually different for me. And I probably have lived with a disability all my life. And I feel like I was really, had that disability when I was young and then picked it up again when I was 15. But it did go the whole way through. And I think changing that identification, it's helped me access a community that I've never thought that I was part of. And I'm not sure if you can relate, having, a more rare condition as well, that it's hard to find people that have the same condition as you and to find that community. And when you realize that there's a whole chronically ill and disabled community out there that you're welcome in, I think that's really special. And it changed a lot for me. And not that I always feel like I belong in it though. I think there's like that imposter syndrome of, but other people have it worse, or
Oh yeah. I get that. I feel that all the time. Yeah. I had never met anyone else with bladder exstrophy until last week. I had an interview with the girl for the first time who has bladder exstrophy as well. And I had never talked to any other BE patient, never compared experiences, never had that community. And it felt like coming home, honestly, talking to her and sharing stories. And it's just such a different experience. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really strange. And like, it's like you've found your family in a way, like in a strange way. That's how I've felt anyway, that there are these people that can be complete strangers to me. And then, I talk to them about my experiences and they've experienced the same thing. And we understand each other fully just because of that. And I think that's so, so special. And it's so sad that so many of us are separated at birth, that as children, we're not always put together, or introduced to other people, or able to start comparing experiences from a young age and helping each other work things out and navigate through the system. I think that there's something really special about finding other people that have been through similar things to you.
Yeah, I think that's harder to do when it is such a rare condition that you're born with, to find people at an earlier age, for sure.
Yeah.
So you kind of mentioned, like, when you were younger, you were never really like embarrassed by anything. Do you remember how you felt as a kid about yourself? I mean, we kind of talked about it just now, that you didn't view yourself as disabled, but is there anything else like on top of that?
Yeah, so as a child, like I briefly mentioned, I thought everybody had VACTERL. I thought everybody spent a lot of time in the hospital, because when I was a kid, obviously I was in a kids' hospital with other kids that, had very different conditions to me, but they were kids too. Like they were like kids like at school. So I was really proud actually of of my disability when I realized that I was different, because I'd run around at school and ask everybody about how their washouts are, which are my, rectal enemas or colonic irrigation, and they didn't know what I was talking about. So I finally realized, okay, like that's not something that people are familiar with. So I talked to my parents. They told me I was the only one at school that does this, that they know of. And then instead of being like, oh no, I want to be shy about it, this was when, I was 5 or 6. I thought, oh my goodness, I can use this for show and tell. So I made a poster, and we had like my, those sort of diagrams where you can see everyone's internal organs, and they're all just sketched. So we had like a normal or typical person one, and then we had me. And like we used whiteout to white out all the things that I didn't have, like the other kidney or the like breaks and different things. So did like a spot the difference. We had photos of me with my like colostomy. And then, we said, if any kids want to know about like my scars or anything, just ask. And so they all asked, because scars were cool when you're 5. And so, I'd be lifting up my shirt and showing everyone all my scars. And I just loved it. Like I thought it was great. And so I was at the same school when I was in grade 1 and 2 where all of the show and tell thing happened. And then I went to a different school for only grade 3. And there I just didn't really, like, it's not that I was ashamed or anything, but I just kind of wanted to be a normal kid, because I thought I was a normal kid still. Even though I sort of knew there was a difference, I was still a normal kid. So didn't speak about it much. And then I think as I went into primary school and high school, or later primary school, I was more conscious of, trying to be the same as everybody else, or trying to, do the same things even when I may not have capacity, and it may be a lot more difficult for me. So I wasn't ashamed, but I didn't like wear it with the same pride. I didn't lift my shirt up anymore at school. I kept myself closed, and yeah.
I love that you did a show and tell about that. And it wasn't just like bringing in the tools that you use. It was like the diagram and showing the differences. And I really, really love that, because that's such a teachable moment to so many people. Because, those kids also went home to their parents and probably told them about that. And I mean, I love that so much.
Yeah, I think I provided a lot of teachable moments. Like when I went to that last primary school that I was telling you about from grades 4 to 7, I did tell my friends, like, I've got this condition. I didn't really know how to say it. Like all I knew was that the main thing that would annoy me was, being incontinent and having to have rectal enemas every day. So I just thought that was my main issue, even though I knew I had VACTERL. So if I wanted to tell someone, what my health problem was, I'd say I was born without a bum. That's all I'd say. And then there was this rumor going around school that my bottom was made out of plastic, because if I was born without one, then how come I have one now? Must be plastic, because that's what kids think, or like plastic surgery or something. I don't know. I had like this mother call my mother very, very concerned, and was like, I've heard this awful rumor going around that isn't true and blah, blah, blah. And I had people coming up to me at school asking if they could like touch my bottom, because they thought it would be like hard plastic. So it was a bit weird for a little bit there, but we eventually got it to a teachable moment of no, like it's not made of plastic, still made of flesh. Like, yeah.
Preferred if you didn't touch it.
Oh, yeah.
At least that's kind of funny. Like in hindsight, like.
Yeah. I still found it funny at the time, because I was just so shocked. I was like, how did you get to that?
How did you get to that point from what I said?
Yeah.
Kids, that's how.
Yeah.
So you went to school, you had friends. Were you able to partake in hobbies, or was all of your time outside of school spent at the hospital?
No, I did have hobbies, I think. I'm just not good at like defining what my hobbies are. But I think at that age, I did debating in school, which I really enjoyed. I did choir because one of my friends did it, but I could not sing to save my life. So did that as a hobby.
Could your esophagus handle the singing?
Yeah, thankfully it was okay. But like I was put in the alto because I've got a deeper voice. So I literally just had to go like, oh, like the entire time, like make a low, long noise. And that was it. So yeah, I didn't do much, but I did that. I did some like volunteering at aged care homes, like things like that. But I was very academic focused. And then like I started going to the gym when I was like 15 to try and build up my strength. So yeah, I was doing all of that and caring for my father that had the stroke when I was 11 years old. So all of my weekends were up on the Sunshine Coast, whereas I went to school in Brisbane. So the weekends weren't really used for kind of like social things or hobbies. It was more about being like with my family and making sure that everything's okay.
Gotcha. Okay. When you started working out, were you working towards building muscle in a certain area? Because I know, like, I personally, not like I've been working out recently as I should be, but I should be working out a lot of like my core to build up all of my abdominals, because that's really important for bladder health and that whole connectivity in that area. Is there anything that you focus on that kind of helps?
I probably should have, but I didn't. I basically have tried like most different kinds of exercise, and I don't like any of them, to be honest with you. But I definitely found, building up my core was quite important, because I've been cut through in my stomach or my core so many times. And every time they're cutting through your layers of muscle, and it's hard to get that back sometimes. So like making sure that I had strength there was important. And it also helped when I had, unexpected surgeries with the recovery, because I had those muscles there. But then otherwise, a little bit of my back to try and get a bit more support. And I just tried everything. Trying to look like a Victoria's Secret model. That was the aim, wasn't it?
That's what everybody wanted to look like.
Exactly.
I remember those days.
Right? Exactly.
Absolutely. I knew exactly which model I wanted to look like too.
Fun.
I was in love with Candace.
Oh, that's who I'm in love with. She was my favorite as well. Absolutely, hands down, forever.
Oh my gosh, I wanted her butt so bad.
Yeah. And I cannot believe that she's managed to have 2 children and still look so good.
I know. I had no idea. I found her on Instagram like 2 years ago and found out she had kids. And I was like, what? How did you maintain that body? That must be so much work. Yeah. And then I think about how much exercise that is. And then I don't feel like looking like that anymore.
Yeah, me too, to be honest with you. It's too difficult, too painful. Yeah, I prepared a pageant a few years ago, and I was exercising so often. Like I had so many sessions with PTs, like I was eating super clean and all of that. But afterwards, I'd kind of built up my body to be a lot more muscly than it was. And him and I were talking about maybe I should go on like a bodybuilding comp, but like a fitness one, like a bikini fitness one, not a big one. But then he told me I had to start counting like macros and micros and all of that. And I was like, no way. I'm not doing any of that. I'm not that committed. No.
It's too much.
No, I don't go to the gym. So there you go.
And I saw on your website that did you win that pageant?
I came second. So, yeah. So it was very exciting for me because I'd never done a pageant before. Like I'd done modeling when I was, younger, like from about 2015 to 2016 were my like more full-time years. And then I kind of dropped back a little bit more. But 2019, I auditioned for a pageant, made it to nationals. And then I was like, if I'm going to do this, I might as well do it well. So I started exercising and doing all that social media stuff, which I'm not very good at. But yeah, and then I came second, and it was such an incredible experience because it was a transition from modeling where, you're just seen and you're not heard to actually having a voice, because you have to speak, you have to interview, you have to interact. So that was a good transition. But once I came second, I was like, I can never do a pageant again because I'm not going to do that well next time. So that's my pageantry career.
You're one time only, and it was a success, and now you can hang up that sash.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So another question I wanted to ask was how your parents communicated with you about all of your medical things. Were they pretty open to discussing things with you when you had questions? Like my mom used to ask me if I had any questions that I wanted to ask the doctors, and she would make sure to have like a list of her questions and then a list of my questions. Did they ever do anything like that? Or
I don't think we were organized enough to write questions for appointments, but we really should have been. So yeah, we had like really open communication around what my condition was. And I always understood it. So I could repeat to the doctors, you know, what was going on with me from such a young age, which I think was so, so important. And it was a very open thing in my household. Like everyone knew about VACTERL, would get removalists, you know, to like move from house to house. And my dad would be having a conversation like, my daughter was born with 2 vaginas. And I'm there like 7, like hands over my ears, being like, stop. You know, you can't say that. But yeah, it's pretty funny.
yeah, that is pretty funny. He's just proud of you.
Yeah.
So what do you still deal with today? Like, I assume you're on plenty of medications. I know you're on the one for your heart. Kind of talked about working out and how maybe we should be. Do you like do any specific dietary restrictions or anything like that to help?
No, not really. So I had quite a large surgery in 2020 that didn't go right, and I lost quite a lot of weight. So I went from, like, I'm quite tall, and I went from 63 kilos like a few months before surgery because I was getting sicker, and I was down to 60 when I had the operation, which isn't that bad. Like it's kind of in the just underweight range. But yeah, then I wasn't able to eat or drink for 10 days. They had wrapped my stomach around the bottom of my esophagus, and I lost 6 kilos in 10 days. And then it was really hard to gain that back. So I gained back a bit after surgery, but then I lost it all again. So I've been basically in a fight back and forth because, you know, if you're looking at my BMI is actually very low, but yeah, I had an NG tube for a while, and I was having 1,300 calories pumped into me as I was sleeping and then waking up. And do you have KFC in America?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'd be like getting such KFC meals and like getting so many, you know, like fattening things and just shoving them all in my mouth at once. Like I was eating so much and I could not gain anything. And it was so frustrating, but I've managed to gain like just a few kilos now, but I'm still lower than I was when I got out of hospital, which is a shame. So in terms of diet, I eat everything. If it's more fattening, perfect, which will change at some point, obviously. And I take, a few medications, but mainly it's just going back and forth to the hospital all the time, seeing so many specialists and having all these little fires pop up, you know, like my fire was this weight loss and problems with digesting and problems with my bowel. And they were trying to get me to go and have an ileostomy, like a colostomy for your small bowel.
Okay.
And I said no. So we just kind of have been around in all these circles and relatively the same now, but just not as well as I was a few years ago.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. That's what the surgery was for? Was the colostomy that you decided not to do, or?
No, so the surgery was called a funduplication. So it was to prevent reflux.
Oh,
so okay. Around the bottom of your esophagus, so the reflux can't come up. So that's what the surgery was for. And that was in 2020. But then as I started to decline and lose weight, like my bowels just completely stopped working, like everything started shutting down. And they said that, you know, you need to get an ileostomy, like your large colon does not work. That's the only solution that we have for you. And I just refused, to be honest. Like there's no better way to put it. So I'd just go to these appointments and tell me that's my only option. And I'd say no. And they'll be like, okay, we'll see you next time to talk about it again. But yeah, I think it's inevitable. It will probably happen at some stage, but I'd like to go as long as I possibly can without that. Yeah.
It's really a shame there isn't more that they can do, or that there hasn't been like enough studies into figuring out what else can be done in situations like this.
it was like 6 months ago, I genuinely thought that I was going to die. Like, I didn't think that I was going to make it to this year. Like, it was a dire situation. Like, I was rake thin. I got down to about 47 kilos, which is such a dangerous BMI for someone of my height. And yeah, and like my bowels weren't working. I was in and out of hospital. I had no energy. I literally remember I called the psychologist that I see at the pain center, and I hadn't seen her in quite a while. And I just said, like, I need to come in. And I sat there with her and I said, you know what, this is all that's happened. And I think that I'm going to die. And she just said to me, she was like, well, you know, you're not exaggerating. You're not catastrophizing. Like, that's actually how it seems at the moment. And it's really scary. And so she basically talked to me about, like, what could I do with my life to make it more fulfilling, because I always work like 24/7. And so she said, you know, maybe you shouldn't work as much. Maybe you should try and, you know, socialize more and do things that bring you joy. And yeah, so it was difficult for a few months there while I was trying to process what's going to happen. Like, do I have a future? And I think that's something I did very internally, but it was very scary. So I'm just grateful to be a bit better now. And I don't feel like I'm going to die anytime soon, but it was scary for a little while for me. Yeah.
Wow. I got goosebumps. My eyes got all watery. So I just feel for you.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that, like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but for me, like, it's, you know, they throw things at you left, right, and center. So many extreme things are said to you. Like, I've been told in the past 5 years that there are so many things that could limit my life, or that I could suddenly die from, or this or that. And then I've been left to process it. And if I bring it up again with the doctor, they're like, oh, that's dramatic, isn't it? I didn't say it like that, or they didn't mean it like that, or this or that, because I see so many specialists, they never talk to each other. So yeah, it's very invalidating, but very weird, you know, constantly facing your mortality.
Yeah.
But such is life.
Yeah. For people like us.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. But was the reflex fixed?
Not really, no.
No? Oh, no. I was going to say, hopefully there's a bright side to the surgery.
Yeah. They wrapped it so tight that no reflux could come up, but no food or water could go down. So it was fixed, sort of, but even all of my saliva was pooling in my esophagus, so I couldn't lie down, and was constantly drowning and aspirating into my lungs.
Oh my gosh.
So then they had to undo it. And when they undid it, you know,
reflex came back.
Got my reflex back, but it was still like, it was tight, and there was something that wasn't fully undone, or something wrong. So I had to have, you know, dilatations. I had to have multiple rounds of Botox. Yeah, all from this surgery that I never should have had. And
wow.
Yeah, again, I don't know if you feel like this either, but I feel like I've been such an expert on my own body that when I have a bit of an intuitive thing to say no, and I don't say no, that I'm really angry at myself when it goes wrong, because I've had millions of surgeries, never worry for a second. But the night before that surgery, I could not sleep at all. And I was going to make like a vlog of, you know, my experience. So I've got all these videos. And in the video the night before, like, I literally am like, you know, holding up a selfie camera, and I was like, I am really worried that, you know, they could wrap this too tight and I wouldn't be able to swallow or this or that. And that's exactly what happened. I knew it, and I should have trusted myself. But it was very scary, because in those 10 days, they were like, we don't know if we can ever get you back to a stage where you'll eat or drink again. I was like, oh, great.
Thank you.
So, like, refreshing.
That's reassuring. Thank you.
And it was, yeah, pretty traumatizing, to be honest.
Wow. Yeah. It's a no wonder you don't really like doctors and going to the hospital. And
I like the good ones. Like, there are so many that I like, and I've had really great experiences, but it's just some have been really bad experiences, and then how they've been handled afterwards hasn't been positive either. So I think that's why the work that I do now is so much about how can we work together to use our lived experience to start to influence how the health system operates, to try and teach doctors, to try and engage like in a good way, like with good intentions. You know, I don't want to go to someone and be like, well, you ruined my life and all of this horrible thing all these horrible things have happened, but go in there with like a really constructive mindset on how you can work together to make it better. And I think a lot of the work that I do now, because I do work with not-for-profits and hospitals and speaking and all of that, and in speaking I talk more about my bad experiences, but a lot of the other things, they would have no idea that certain things have happened to me, because I think that sometimes there's a perception if you get someone that's angry at the system or that's had a poor experience, they're not the people that you want engaging with you to try and make it better. But
right.
Yeah, so you just have to be careful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are the people that they should be hearing from.
It's people I need to hear from most. Yeah. Exactly. And I think, creating more opportunities where people can just hear, what your story is, what my story is, what our priorities are, what could have made our lives better, because there is still going to be kids born with our conditions, maybe not every day, maybe every day somewhere in the world, but yeah, and there needs to be something better for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. You ever need someone to help out on anything on the West Coast, the US, let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get you. Yeah, I think it's just so important that there are so many different lived experiences and we can all work together, and that there are power in numbers. And I think that, as people with rare diseases, it's so fragmented. If we all come together, there's something like a few 100 million of us in the world. But when we're all separated, there isn't. So finding ways that we can come together as communities, whether it's the rare disease or disability or chronic illness community, despite our differences, to actually work towards something really positive.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit, because we've talked a lot about all of your medical stuff, but you've done so much with your life too. I mean, we talked about you being in the pageant, and you kind of mentioned your book, and you have your own health agency now, and you mentioned you modeled a little bit. I wanted to ask a few things. First, how did you break into the modeling world, and what kind of pushback you got? Because I know, like myself, you've got scars, and that's not an easy thing to have in the modeling world, and there's going to be a lot of pushback. And I'm wondering if that just made you want to work harder towards it.
Yeah, I think I'm probably one of those people that someone says no, and I'm like, well, that's basically what happened. So when I was 15, my mum was like, you're not ladylike, you don't, cross your legs enough, you don't do this, you don't do that. And I was like, oh, come on. And I got enrolled in this like modeling and deportment course. And of course, I think that a lot of, young girls think, I want to be a model someday. Or maybe it was just me, but it was definitely me that I thought, oh, that's something cool. I'd love to do that. And I'd be the like little kid that would dress up and, try and put on like that awful makeup that would be like $2 from the store with glitter and all of that. So that's what I was like. But doing this course, it showed me how modeling works as an industry and as a profession and all the things involved. And I could see it was quite challenging, but I liked the challenge. So I decided that, it is something that I wanted to do. And I submitted to a few agencies and I didn't hear anything back. But I then was in contact with the agency that ran the modeling course, and they invited me to come in and talk about having a contract. So that was really exciting for me. And I went in and everything was looking good. And then just at the end, they said, oh, do you have any scars? And I was like, yeah, I do. And they're like, would like to see them. So I lifted up my shirt again and they saw them and they basically said, you'll never be able to model and show your stomach, like ever. So that's going to really limit, what you're able to do, because even castings for, jobs that you're going to be wearing clothes for, you go in a bikini and this and that. And basically made it look like, we want to represent you, we want to do things with you, but you're just never going to be able to show your stomach, and we'll never show you, we'll never send you to anything where you can show your stomach. So I just, I did that little, photo shoot again and all of that. But then I basically just dropped out of contact because I thought that was ridiculous. I don't want to be a model to not show my scars. I actually want to be a model to show my scars. That's kind of the point for me. And I just started working as hard as you can when you're working towards something that someone else controls because they decide, if you're the right look or whatever. But I ended up casting for a boutique modeling agency in Brisbane, just out of coincidence, about a year afterwards, because I'd gotten into like fashion and like making clothes. So I had all of these photos of me in the clothes, brought them as like a little portfolio to this new agency, and they signed me. It was so exciting. So I just didn't say anything about my scars. Like, I knew I had to walk in a bikini. I put a little bit of concealer over them, which is a bit naughty. So I was like, I'm going to break in. And I got in and they were lovely. And I just started working hard. I started saying yes to every single opportunity that I was given. And within, like, I was on a development 3-month contract. And within the first month, I was offered a full 12-month contract. So that was very exciting. And then I cast for these, bigger runways in Queensland in my bikini, and I got in. And I was like, hang on a second, this is pretty cool. And then I started, getting some traction, and I went over to Amsterdam for a holiday, and I arranged to meet with an agency over there while I was there. And I ended up getting signed and basically cancelling my return ticket home and staying there for the next 2 months to pursue my dreams. So I was 17 in Amsterdam, no health insurance, staying with this random 20-year-old guy that I'd never met before, that I just moved in with, just, I guess, trying to live out my dream. And I'd be catching so much public transport every day to go to all these different castings and things. And I did a few fashion shows, and I did Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week in Amsterdam the day before my 18th birthday, which was huge because it was something that I'd had as a goal, like when I was kind of starting out in modeling. But it was hilarious. This girl with her scars from a little agency in Brisbane, she's never going to get to Fashion Week, let alone Fashion Week overseas. And I did it. But I worked really, really hard, and I did face barriers, and they weren't just barriers because of my scars. Sometimes you're just not the right look, or they measure you and you're too big. And so I'd have my measurements written down with arrows to what my measurements should be if I can lose some weight and all of that. So it was an intense environment. And I think that the modeling agency or modeling industry is saying that it's more accepting now, which I hope it is, but it was saying that it was getting more accepting then, and it was still incredibly damaging to a lot of people.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible that you managed to break through and really make it happen for yourself like that.
Yeah, I'm really proud of myself. And for me, I think modeling was there to serve a purpose. And now I'm signed with a new agency that's a disability modeling agency, and I'm really excited for what happens there because I feel like genuinely this aligns with me and who I am and my vision. But at that stage of my life, modeling was there to serve a purpose that had actually served really, really well. I wanted to be able to be a representation or ambassador for other people with VACTERL, other people that had scars or invisible disabilities. And so in my head, I only had to get to my goal of Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week, and then I could throw up hang up the towel, because I did what I needed to do. And after I did it, I started, sharing my story a little bit. It actually took a year after, or 2 years after Fashion Week, or 1.5 anyway, for me to start sharing my story, because I didn't realize that it had as much power as it did. And I didn't really feel that disabled at that point because I had managed to stay overseas for 2 months by myself. Like, I actually did pass out multiple times, like blackout, and they had to get me up and everything. So it wasn't all easy, but yeah, I know it wasn't great, but I felt like, I needed to do that. Once I'd done that, I'd been the example and representation, but I wasn't necessarily feeling like I'd experienced too many severe health issues in that last year because I was able to go off and do modeling. But 2017, I had 3 abdominal surgeries in 8 months. And after that, I was like, I've got some experience to talk about. So I actually posted on one of those online Facebook groups, a photo of me in hospital and a photo of me at Fashion Week a year apart. Was like, anything's possible. And I just had such an overwhelming response. And that's when I knew I have to do advocacy. I have to share my story. I have to write my book. And it's really was the domino effect. And even though modeling wasn't that crucial to me and didn't make such a huge difference in my life, I think being able to tell other people whose kids are, in the neonatal intensive care that, like, hey, this girl has the same condition. Look, she's just modeled. She's done this, she's done that. It has so much value to them. And I think that's what has been really important about how my journey's kind of progressed from modeling now to advocacy and business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I completely agree. I've had a handful of bladder extrophy moms like reach out to me on social media and they just want to know about everyday life and like just know that I've been able to live a life essentially so that they know that their kids are going to be okay. And I think being able to say like, yeah, I did all of the normal kids school things. I went to college, like I've had jobs, like I have a stable relationship, like I've been able to build a life for myself, like your kids are going to be fine.
Yeah, I just think it's so important. And that was, again, one of the reasons why I'm doing everything that I'm doing now, because my mom was one of those moms and my dad was one of those dads that was so terrified of their child's future. Like, not only are they going to survive, but are they going to thrive? You know, are they going to be able to have a normal life? Will anyone love them and be in a relationship with them? You know, will they be able to be okay? I think. And that was what was so important to me, because there was no one that I could look to when I was growing up, no one that they could look to when I was growing up to say, it's going to be okay. And I know that if they'd been able to see me now, even though I've got quite a few issues, they would have just been so relieved to know that it's still possible to be happy as well.
Yes.
Because I think that's what it comes down to. Like, it comes down to, you know, you have all this medical stuff, but are you happy, like, with your life and who you are?
Absolutely.
And to an extent. I was like, I'd love to be in this big mansion and this and that, but life's good.
I think there's always going to be something that we're always wanting, but what is your book called again?
Behind the Smile. And the subtitle, is an inspirational journey from disability to ability, because I was trying to express that, you know, a disability isn't a disability. Like, you still have a lot of abilities. Like, how can you use a positive mindset to actually transform adversity into your strengths? And I like the behind smile because, you know, I was always that happy person that was out there smiling, and you would have no idea that there were any, you know, medical problems behind that or any challenges in my life behind that. Because I think that even though I've got a lot of medical crap, and you probably do too, that there's still other stuff in life. You know, you can still have a crappy fight with your like partner, or you can still have family issues, or you can still have, you know, you want to get a job or you don't have enough money, or all those typical struggles as well. And I think adversity comes down to adversity. Like, it's quite similar. If you can get your way out of, you know, being in a state of adversity with your health, then I think you're well equipped to get yourself out of other, you know, adverse situations.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for anyone listening that wants to check it out, I will link the book in the show notes for everyone as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to add or talk about at all? Because I think that's kind of it for my questions.
Yeah, I think maybe just briefly, like how I actually got to, you know, Champion Health Agency, because that's really what I'm doing now. And what happened was, like I said, you know, I realized my story had so much value, and I started speaking. Like, I spoke in America and Australia and Pakistan twice, which was a really interesting experience, and came back to Australia and started working with, you know, not-for-profits, doing, you know, advisory work, ambassador stuff, media interviews. And then it progressed to actually working with health services, where I could sit on different boards or committees and actually influence what happens for all those like tens of thousands of people coming through outpatients every month. And I saw that, you know, lived experience has so much power, and it's so diverse. Like, you can be like, you can spread your lived experience through modeling, bit difficult, but you could. You can spread it as a speaker, as like working with all these different organizations. And I saw that like there was no one pulling that together. That's actually what I wanted to do for my career, because this disability isn't going away, and I'm going to have to, you know, face challenges for the rest of my life. So I wanted to have something that would be really meaningful to me, it would be meaningful to other people, and it would allow me the flexibility to do, you know, work when I could do it. And it would allow all those people that are technically classed as, you know, unemployed and that they're not able to get employment, they would actually be able to have opportunities to do things. Like, imagine if you can do a role as a speaker and you can get paid enough for your weekly rent or a few weeks' rent. And that's it. And it brings so much value to the audience. Like, I thought that was so important and so powerful. So all of that experience and the need for someone to actually manage me and what I do made me, start Champion Health Agency to actually, represent other people with chronic illness and disabilities and carers to actually professionalize that lived experience and access, all those opportunities that I have, but also so many more, because then it would give them, a lot of freedom financially, but also it would give them a lot of meaning behind, all these awful experiences that they've had and positive experiences too. So that's been basically my full time now, and I speak on a few panels. Like, what the past few weeks I've probably spoken on 6 panels. Been really busy, and I've done a literature review and published my first research paper, which is being peer reviewed now, so it'll be properly published in a journal hopefully soon. But it's just been incredibly busy and opened up my eyes to all the different opportunities that you can actually access just because you've had a lived experience of disability or chronic illness or accessing the health system.
Wow, that's incredible. We might need to talk sometime again outside of the podcast about it.
That's good.
Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on. I think you've lived through an incredible amount. You're just so positive about all of it too. It's really neat to see like that personality really shine through.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. I feel like I've become a bit cynical and negative in my old age. But yeah, I think it's really important to have that, positive attitude and not toxic positivity, because no one likes that. Apart from us, I kind of like it sometimes for myself. But yeah, I think it's important to, have a positive view, because I would never be able to live the life that I'm living now, which is so fulfilling and has impacted so many people's lives, if I wasn't born with that condition, and if I hadn't gone through all of that awful trauma and procedures and this and that it's all actually happened for a reason. As much as people kill me for saying that, I feel like it has. And I'm really happy that I was born with VACTERL, to be honest, so I could understand this better.
Yeah, my mom and I talk about that all the time too, that even though we didn't necessarily like that I had to put up with, surgeries and doctor's appointments, that both of us are happy that I was born with bladder exstrophy as well.
Yeah. And I think that shows people, like, why would you be happy that you're born with, a condition that makes you have to go to hospital all the time? But it's true. Like, you would have skills that no one else would have. I have skills that no one else would have. And we've built that, through our experiences. And for all the people listening, I'm sure that they have as well. And yeah, I think it's for a reason. We're going to do great things. You're already doing great things.
Thanks. Well, thank you for coming on the show again.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This week's episode of Body Talk with Becks. I hope you found it as enjoyable as I did, and she had some really crazy stories to share with us that just left me with goosebumps. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts at. Also consider becoming a patron on patreon.com. We just rolled out some great stickers for patrons, which are also available on the website if you just want to purchase a sticker. If you would like to share your story or know someone who would like to, I can be contacted through my website, www.bodytalkwithbecks.com, or on social media. Thanks for listening.